Now you're all good to go, my good man.
Okay.
All right.
Now, can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can.
Yes, sir.
Great. So we give a couple of minutes with words. Miguel, when do they start their next class?
Class is next week, Thursday. They get 5 more Thursdays and then they finish.
Okay. We really got to push tonight. I can see how far we can get tonight.
When is the exam, by the way? What's the date? Miguel?
Tentatively, the last Saturday in August. No, sorry. Can't be then. I'll have to look on the schedule, man. I think it's either the second Saturday in September. I have to look on the schedule. It's on a Saturday, okay?
All right. So we have to come into the...
Yeah, y'all will come into the institute. I sit on the computer.
Sorry?
Yeah, you'll come into the institute and sit in front of the computer.
Okay, so...
I didn't send you all instructions, eh?
Sorry?
I didn't send you all any information, eh?
Not in reference to the exam, no, that's why I was asking.
Okay, I can forward that to you all in the morning. I promise.
All right. Well, you know.
I know.
So question. After the exam is on the computer, so that means we get the results right away?
Correct. So when is your assignment due? Your assignment is due next week, right?
I saw you send an email,
Yeah. So what I can do, once I get your assignment grades, I send that to them. And then your grade and your computer-based exam will be added up together. And then you get your results right away.
Wow.
All right.
I hear you. Is the exam, it's a written short answer.
Multiple choice, open book.
Multiple choice, open book.
Yeah.
Okie dokie.
All right.
All right.
You sound like you're ready to set this exam.
No, not in no way, form, or fashion. I can be honest with you. I'll be real honest with you.
Everybody
there's a lot of information, and the calculations is another story, but you know.
I'll tell you something. Everybody figures they're not ready. Even if you had a year to prepare, you still do. But you'll be surprised the amount of knowledge you've absorbed.
But it's a lot of information to read. I mean, I've been trying to read over between sneaking at work and because I sent some of the handouts and things to myself and try to read like on a lunch break or something. But there's a lot of information, and the definitions is a lot to memorize, and yeah.
Oh, it's the concept is
calculations is another thing for me anyway.
Yes, you mean calculations such as in the future value of money and so forth like that. The time value of money. Are you there?
I'm here, I'm listening.
No, you're frightened about calculations as it relates to the time value of money, those types of calculations?
For the most part, you know, I just like try to practice and see what information I can find, but in all honesty, yeah.
Because I sent you all some practice questions. You received those, right?
Sorry?
I had Miguel send you guys some practice questions.
Okay. I need to look for those then.
Did you receive those?
I would have to look through my email. I don't remember seeing anything, but I'd have to check again just to be sure.
And I had him send you guys the time value of money tables.
Now I got the tables. That was a while back, like a few classes back, right? When he sent those out.
It may have been, you know.
I think it was a few classes back in reference to the time value tables. I have those ones, but I need to check my email again to see about the practice questions in reference to the stuff for calculations.
Okay, please do. Because like I said, this exam is primarily, I don't know if Miguel has sent you guys any past CFP exams, but this exam is like every other exam, practicing a lot of questions and testing your knowledge. So, I mean, because not only is the exam content, but little other things like how they ask questions, you know? So I could just encourage people, just get as much questions as you could from Miguel, past questions. I think I have some too from past exams that Miguel may have given us from the time I was doing the exam, that I could share that question bank with you guys also.
That'd be great.
You know, just getting questions and practicing. Why I don't like to send the questions ahead of time is because you haven't finished to complete all of the modules yet. So I don't want y'all running into questions across modules that you guys haven't covered. And a lot of the questions have to do with your next section. Okay, now, because we have so much to cover tonight, I am going to start us off. So I have you. Who else has joined us now?
It looks like just me. Claudia, how you doing?
Okay, you, Claudia Rodriga. Good, connecting the audio, good. Good evening all. We're gonna start tonight, we're going over investment products, fundamentals of portfolio management. Basically, fundamentals of portfolio management has to do with something they call asset allocation. Asset allocation is the process of deciding how to distribute an investor's wealth among different countries and asset classes for investment purposes. An asset class is comprised of securities that have similar characteristics, attributes, and risk-return relationships. A broad asset class, such as bonds, can be divided into smaller asset classes, such as treasury bonds, corporate bonds, and high-yield bonds. We will see that in the long run, the highest compounded returns will most likely accrue to those investors with larger exposure to risky assets. It's just saying that age-old saying, the higher the risk, the higher the return. What they never say is the higher the risk, the higher could be the possible loss too. We will also see that although there are no shortcuts or guarantees of investment success, maintaining a reasonable and disciplined approach to investing will increase the likelihood of investment success over time. The asset allocation decision is not an isolated choice. Rather, it is a component of the portfolio management process. As we will see, the first step in the process is to develop an investment policy statement or plan that will guide all future decisions. Much of an asset allocation strategy depends upon the investment policy statement, which includes the investor's goals or objectives, constraints and investment guidelines. What do we mean by an investor? What we mean by an investor can range from an individual to a trustee overseeing a corporation's multi-billion-dollar pension fund, a university endowment, or an investment premium for an insurance company. Regardless of who the investor is or how simple or complex the investment needs, he or she should develop a policy statement before making long-term investment decisions. Okay, couple of things. Asset allocation. Asset allocation basically is how do you invest your money over the different types of asset classes. When you've done this, the next step is developing a portfolio. Once you start investing in different asset classes, you then have a portfolio. Now, at the very onset, what they're saying, this should not be done helter-skelter, but should be done in a very systematic and planned way. And it should be done bearing in mind what your investment objectives are. Investor life cycle. Life insurance can be a component of any financial plan. Life insurance protects loved ones against financial hardship should death occur before our financial goals are met. The death benefit paid by the insurance company can help pay medical bills and funeral expenses and provide cash that family members can use to maintain their lifestyles, retire debt, or invest for future needs, spouse retirement, children's education, etc. Therefore, one of the first steps in developing a financial plan is to purchase adequate life insurance coverage. Insurance can also serve immediate purposes, including being a means to meet long-term goals, such as a retirement plan. On reaching retirement age, you can receive the cash or surrender value of your life insurance policy and use the proceeds to supplement your retirement lifestyle or for estate planning purposes. You can choose among several life insurance contracts: term life, variable life, insurance company may restrict the ability to withdraw funds from these policies before the policyholder reaches a certain age. Insurance coverage also provides products against other uncertainties. Health insurance helps to pay medical bills. Disability insurance provides continuing income should you become unable to work. Should you become unable to work, automobile and home insurance provide protection against accident and damage to cars or residences. Although nobody ever expects to use his or her insurance coverage, a first step in a sound financial plan is to have adequate coverage just in case. Cash reserve. Emergencies, job layoffs, and unforeseen expenses happen, and good investment opportunities emerge. It is important to have a cash reserve to help meet these occasions. Can somebody give me an example of when this advice would have come in handy recently?
During the pandemic with job loss or salary reduction.
You ain't gotta say nothing more. All you have to do is watch the news and see how much people was lined up outside NIB. In addition to providing a safety cushion, a cash reserve reduces the likelihood of being forced to sell investments at inopportune times to cover unexpected expenses. Most experts recommend a cash reserve equal to about 6 months living expenses. Most experts recommend a cash reserve equal to about 6 months living expenses. Most experts recommend a cash reserve equal to about 6 months living expenses. Why do you think I say that 3 times to you?
Because you want us to,
It's important.
yeah, you want us to remember that most people recommend 6 months worth of living expenses for cash reserves.
And you know, this pandemic has shown even this is very conservative. 6 months is very conservative. I think after this pandemic, this one statement is going to probably be expanded to try and get this up to 12 months. Calling it a cash reserve does not mean the funds should be in cash. Rather, the funds should be in investments you can easily convert to cash with little chance of a loss in value. Money market mutual funds and bank accounts are appropriate vehicles for cash reserve. Similar to financial, they covered a couple of things there. Some things they sort of tried to get you, a couple of things you need to have no matter what asset classes you invest in, insurance. And the second one is a cash reserve. All right, I mean, nobody wants to go willy-nilly invest all your cash in securities, and then you find you run into a little hiccup. You got to start selling off your securities. You may not get the original principal, what you sold, what you invested in. Similar to the financial plan, an investor's insurance and cash reserve needs will change over his or her life. The needs for disability insurance declines when a person retires. In contrast, other insurance, such as supplemental medical coverage or long-term care insurance, may become more important. Yeah, and that's the one time that they just pull that when you get old. Assuming the basic insurance and cash reserve needs are met, individuals can start a serious investment program with their savings. I will say it again. Assuming the basic insurance and cash reserve needs are met, individuals can then start a serious investment program with their savings. Because of changes in their net worth and risk tolerance, individuals' investment strategies will change over their lifetime. Although each individual needs and preferences are different, some general traits affect most investors over the life cycle. Okay, you have here a graph where they're trying to associate your age with the type of investment that you would be going into. And based upon phases, as an accumulation phase, a consolidation phase, spending phase, or gifting phase. All right, from about 25 to about 35, long-term retirement, children's college needs, short-term house and car. So your long-term investments during this accumulation phase should be a retirement type fund, your children's college education fund, your children's college needs, okay? That's long-term. Short-term objectives during this time is a house and a car. Now from about 35 or 45, all the way out to about 65, this is your consolidation phase. Your consolidation phase has a larger focus on your long-term retirement. This is so important. And some of these things I'm emphasizing, not only for the class or the exam, but for some of these lessons for you to take and utilize in your own personal lives. You know, much times, because we don't have any pension legislation, and right up and now, I guess a lot of people, the closest we've come to a national pension is NIB. And let me tell you, NIB ain't enough. And in my time, my experience, it really saddens my heart when I look at people that are nearing retirement and they just start trying to put away something for their retirement. And the thing that has escaped them is time. So even in a lot of private companies and even in government, most of them have pensions now. But let's take for instance, the self-employed person, those people, and there's a lot of small businesses that may have maybe 10 to 15 employees. A lot of them don't have no retirement plan, no pension retirement. And when you're young, your retirement seems so far away that nobody thinks about it. But you know, every day that goes by, retirement is sneaking up closer and closer on you. And the one thing a lot of people will say, well, you know, I am so, my salary can only go so far and I don't have enough money for retirement or put together a plan, even if it's $25 a week. You know, I can't emphasize that enough. So I have seen so many horror stories where people get their retirement age and they are dependent upon their children. And we always had this running joke, our children are our retirement plan. Okay, God bless you if you got good children. Okay, so call this consolidation phase. The long-term objective should be retirement. Short-term, vacations, children college needs, okay? As you hit this consolidation phase, you see children's college needs shift from being long-term to short-term because now your children are grown, they're getting closer to college. The spending phase, this is 65. This is when you start utilizing the funds you have accumulated to try and maintain your lifestyle going forward. Long term could be estate planning. That's what you're going into next. You're going to find out about that. Short term, lifestyle needs and gifts. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have accumulated wealth and houses and so forth, the largest thing with estate planning is have a will. Don't do it to your children where you got a bunch of children or or whatever. You got assets, but you aren't clear. There's no clear-cut plan after your demise how your assets are supposed to be split. And then you got everybody squabbling over, oh yeah, Grammy promised me this. That is so rampant at times. Any questions on that? Good. Accumulation phase. Individuals in the phase are attempting to accumulate assets to satisfy. Well, you guys can read through that because we still got a lot. Spending phase, gifting phase. I've given you an overall summary of what that is about. Unless somebody wants to stop me and ask me exactly to go into what phase and explain a phase a little bit more. Okay, the first phase in the portfolio management process is for the investor to construct a policy statement. The first step in the portfolio management process is for the investor to construct a policy statement. The policy statement is a roadmap. In it, investors specify the type of risks they are willing to take and their investment goals and constraints. All investment decisions are based on the policy statement to ensure they are appropriate for the investor. We examine the process of constructing a policy statement later in this chapter. Because investor needs change over time, the policy statement must be periodically reviewed and updated. The process of investing seeks to peer into the future and determine strategies that offer the best possibility of meeting the policy statement guidelines. Okay. How many times have you heard your peers, and I don't mean, excuse the pun, or your friends, or you yourself have this very, very lofty goal, oh, I want to retire by the time I'm 40. Okay, that's a lofty goal. Now, sit them down and ask them, what is your exact plan to meet this goal? None of them know. In the second step of portfolio management process, the manager should study current financial and economic conditions and forecast future trends. The investor's needs are reflected in the policy statement, and financial market expectations will jointly determine investment strategy. Economies are dynamic. They are affected by numerous industry struggles, politics, and changing demographics and social attitude. Thus, the portfolio will require constant monitoring and updating to reflect the changes in financial market expectations. So, the third step of portfolio management process is to construct the portfolio. First step, come up with your policy statement. The policy statement. Second step is to examine all the second step, to examine the economic environment and business environment, okay? The third step, as it says here, is actually now beginning the construction of the portfolio. With the investor's policy statement and financial forecast as input, the advisors implement the investment strategy and determine how to allocate available funds across different countries, asset classes, and securities. This involves constructing a portfolio that will minimize the investor's risk while meeting the specific needs in the policy statement. The fourth step in the portfolio management process is the continual monitoring of the investor's needs and capital market conditions, and, when necessary, updating the policy statement based upon all of this. The investment strategy is modified accordingly. A component of the monitoring process is to evaluate a portfolio's performance and compare the relative results to the expectation and requirements listed in the policy statement. A policy statement is a roadmap that guides the investment process. Constructing a policy statement is an individual planning tool that will help the investor understand his or her needs better, as well as assist an advisor or portfolio manager in managing a client's funds. While it does not guarantee investment success, a policy statement will provide discipline for the investment process and reduce the possibility of making hasty, inappropriate decisions. there are two important reasons for constructing a policy statement. First, it helps the investor decide on realistic investment goals after learning about the financial market and the risks of investing. Second, it creates a standard by which to judge performance of the portfolio manager. An important purpose of writing a policy statement is to help investors understand their own needs, objectives, and investment constraints. As part of this, investors need to learn about financial markets and the risks of investing. This background will help prevent them from making inappropriate investment decisions in the future and will increase the possibility that they will satisfy their specific, measurable financial goals. Thus, the policy statement helps the investors to specify realistic goals and become more informed about the risks and costs of investing. Here is a schematic that basically just summarizes everything we've talked about so far. Designing an investment policy. The investment policy contains the client's objectives and constraints and the guidelines that the investment manager must follow. Objectives often receive the most attention from investors at the expense of the other policy considerations. Objectives are determined from a thorough discussion with and knowledge of the client's needs, preference, and resources. Major considerations are return, risk, inflation. I'll need you all to read those because I think you all have a pretty good idea of what each one of those subcategories are, but read it if you're not sure. Time horizon and liquidity. I will go on to read liquidity because any investment, this is a major portion that is overlooked many times. Liquidity can have several meanings, including the net working capital of a business and the ability to sell a security quickly without a significant sacrifice in price. In portfolio management, liquidity means the amount of cash and near cash in the portfolio. This ties back to always being aware of what is your cash needs. Taxation is another thing, market timing, you guys can read through that. So you got the investment objectives, then we drop the constraints. Constraints provide some discipline in the fulfillment of a client's objectives. Constraints, which may loosely be defined as those items which may hinder or prevent the investment manager from satisfying the client's objectives, are often not given the importance they deserve in the policy formation process. Perhaps this is because objectives are a more comforting concept to dwell on than the discipline of constraints. Possible constraints include legal, certainly an investment activity which contravenes an act by law, regulation, rule, or criminal code must be considered a constraint. Take, for instance, you may have an investment objective where I want high growth equity. I want high growth equity, and I'm looking to invest in various stock markets in various parts of the world. Well, one of the constraints, certainly for Bahamians, is the exchange. For you to go invest in other stock markets or foreign stock markets, you're going to have to get central bank approval. And there is a cost involved. You have to purchase investment currency. And when you purchase that investment currency, there is a cost associated with it that will impact your total return on your portfolio. Take, for example, I think right now, if you were to buy, let's just say if you were to purchase investment currency, there's somewhere like, I don't know, I'm not certain about it, but I'm going to give this example. Don't quote me. If you have this objective, you would have to contact the foreign exchange unit of the central bank to find out specifically. But let's just say that there is a 20% cost. What the central bank does say, I'll charge you 20%, and upon your return, once the funds are brought back in, you will get back 15% of it. The central bank will keep 5%. What does that mean right away? Well, first of all, if I was planning to invest $100 in foreign markets, by the time the central bank has taken out the cost of purchasing investment currency, I can only end up with $80 going out of the country. So whatever I invested in better be making me more than 20% return. Does everybody understand that? So those are like some of the legal constraints. Moral/ethical. Some transactions and investment activities may not be against the law, but should invariably be treated as if they are. While clients may have preferences for certain types of securities, they may also have strong aversion to certain others. For example, perhaps because of personal convictions, a client may instruct that no alcohol or tobacco stocks are to be purchased. Although it is not normally against the law to purchase these types of securities, and although the securities may fit the client's other objectives perfectly, if the client has instructed the manager to not purchase them, then that order must be respected. Emotions. As full an assessment as possible should be made of the client's temperament. Through discussion and active listening, the manager can fulfill much more of the know your client requirements than if this arena is given only cursory treatment. Investment knowledge. Should a certain strategy be followed if the client clearly does not understand it? For example, writing covered options or using protective puts and other positions may be warranted by the client's circumstances, but the client may not understand them, and particularly will not if they end up losing money. However, serious discussion with the client coupled with active listening can result in a clear agreement on what is permitted. It is the responsibility of the investment manager to explain the investment process to the client, especially where the client is not sophisticated but is interested. Willingness to take risk. Although risk, as mentioned above, in the context of market volatility, here it relates to the client's level of comfort with volatility in income and volatility in principal. I'm sorry, the screen moved on me. Despite the ability of a client to take risks, their willingness may be lower than expected. If a client is interested in stocks and markets and makes worried calls several times a day for a quote, chances are that this product is not appropriate for them. The extra expected return is not worth it if the client cannot sleep because of the extra risk involved. On the other hand, a client may be quite comfortable with speculative currency or option strategies where their tolerance for risk must be much higher. Ability to take risks. The greater the client's need for income from their portfolio, the lower their ability to take risk and impact the strategic allocation of their portfolio. The greater the client's need for income from their portfolio, the lower their ability to take risk and impact the strategic asset allocation of their portfolio. Suppose the client has living expenses in addition to salary, pension, and other income, which requires $20,000 per year in cash flow from the portfolio to meet these expenses. A portfolio may be structured to generate a good total return, but it must also be assured there is $20,000 in current income from the portfolio, or the client will not be able to live on the income. Other questions related to each of the above constraints can reveal a great deal about the client's attitudes and constraints. However, there is also a place for a final overall question such as, is there anything else which we haven't talked about which may be important? It is surprising what can come from such a question, such as a family member who is an insider, legal constraint, a serious illness, income and time horizon, size of the account very small or huge, lottery winning, or a pending material breakup, which somehow did not get discovered in previous conversation. Having discovered the client's objectives and constraints, the next step in designing an investment policy is to summarize this information in terms of the three major objectives of income, capital gain, and preservation of capital. It is these major objectives that will help determine the appropriate asset allocation for the client. So there in this one sentence, it tells you in terms of your policies, what is the three major areas that your portfolio policy should center around: income, capital gains, and preservation of capital. Let's take those three variables into account. Preservation of capital. One major objective is to have some assurance that the initial capital invested will largely remain intact. If this is the main concern about the three major objectives, the client is effectively saying that regardless of whether a small, large, or nil return is generated on the capital, the manager should try to avoid erosion of the amount initially invested. This objective is expressed in constant dollars. The manager should clarify if the portfolio is to cover at least the impact of inflation. There is one simple strategy to make the preservation of an investor's principal fairly certain. Assume an account size of $1 million and a T-bill rate of approximately 5%. Roughly $950,000 can be invested in T-bills, which are considered risk-free and which will mature in 1 year's time at $100,000, restoring the principal amount. The other $50,000 can be invested in some other venture, even a speculative one. And even if the full $7,000 is lost completely, the investor will receive their principal back. Preservation of capital is derived from several objectives and constraints, including risk, market timing, inflation, return, and emotion. Income. This major objective refers to a regular series of cash flows from a portfolio, whether in the form of dividend, interest, or some other form, and is a broader definition than the basic minimum income referred to as a constraint. The taxation of dividends and interest income will be a major determinant of the split between incomes received from debt or equity securities. This split is decided at the time the asset mix is set. Income is influenced by return, risk, inflation, and the basic minimum income, among others. Capital gains. Capital gains is a term related to increases in capital due to the sale proceeds being higher than the cost basis. That is, selling something for more than it costs. Here, the emphasis is on security selection and market timing, and generally is a trade-off against preservation of capital. Capital gains is a major objective that includes risk return, market timing, and emotional consideration, as well as others. Investment policy statement. Ideally, the objectives and constraints, and perhaps even the manager's style, are written down in a formal document called an investment policy statement. This document forms the basis for the agreement between the manager and the client and is in effect the manager's job description. Policy statements can be either elaborate or quite simple, but most cover the objective and constraints of a portfolio. A list of acceptable securities and a list of prohibited securities, as well as the method to be used for performance appraisal. Setting the asset mix. The next step in the asset allocation process is to determine the appropriate balance among the selected asset classes. Using only cash, fixed income, and equity asset classes, the following are some examples of asset mixes determined by the client's risk tolerance and investment goal. Okay, suppose you have a client that wants wealth conservation. These type of investors want to minimize their risk of loss. This is a strategy for strongly risk-averse investors or for funds needed in the short run. Now, here is an example of how your portfolio asset allocation will look in terms of, in relative terms, meaning percentage-wise. Equities may be 15%, fixed income 70%, and ultra-short fixed income 15%. What they mean by ultra-short fixed income is where you have your cash or near cash items. Now here, this is an example of where a person wants wealth conservation. Let's look at something else. Income. A fairly conservative portfolio which emphasizes on fixed income securities with little risk for a slightly higher return. Here, you see now equities are being bumped up to 30%. Previously, for wealth conservation, equities was only 15%. Here, this one has been bumped up to 30%. Fixed income is down from 70% to 58%, and ultra short fixed income is at 12%, down from 15%. So what it's saying is those shifts, those based upon this, if you want income, things have been taken from the ultra short fixed income and the fixed income and placed more in equity type securities. Balanced growth. As the name implies, you basically have a balance between fixed income and equity. Ultra short is down to 10%. Okay, market growth. Here is now shifted where equity investment is the predominant asset class. Fixed income has gone down to 35%, and ultra short income has gone down to 5%. These are people who would have a higher risk tolerance. They're investing in equities, which are riskier than your fixed income. And so they are willing to take the risk for higher return. Aggressive growth will everything in equities. So growth is associated with equities. The importance of asset allocation. A major reason why investors develop policy statements is to determine an overall investment strategy. The policy statement provides a guidance to the asset classes to include and the relative proportions of the investor's funds to invest in each class. How the investor divides funds into different asset classes is a process of asset allocation. The asset allocations noted above have ranges within which the investment manager can allocate the portfolio's assets within a given asset class. These ranges allow the investment manager to actively manage the portfolio while maintaining the client's asset allocation strategy. So basically, you have a very broad overview of how you determine portfolio management. You start out with what is the objective, which is a policy statement, which includes the objectives, the constraints, and then you go on and you migrate slowly into actually coming up with the formation of a portfolio based upon the client's objectives, constraints, their risk tolerance, their liquidity needs. All of these go into this. And even, let me just make a note here. Let's just say, let's go back a slide. Okay, here you have the asset class. Within those asset classes, portfolio management even gets a little bit more trickier. Okay, you say you want this in stock. What type of stocks? What type of industries and so forth? So it really gets involved. Now, I don't know if there are any questions on this segment before we push forward. As I told you, we're trying. I know I'm pushing a little fast tonight because we got a couple other sections to get through. So please let me know if there's anything you want me to just go back and focus on for a little bit.
What we're covering now is fine. The assignments or the questions that we were given as practice. I don't know if I may have missed that because I was en route home. But I would like us to go over the use of the formula.
You mean in determining like the
Future values, present values.
Is this Rodrigo, Ms. Pinder?
Yes, it is.
Ms. Pinder, good evening. I hear you. You can go over the formula on your own, but I'm telling you, you do not need to memorize that formula. That's why I gave you the tables.
Yes, I recall you saying that. However, some of the questions required us to have a working understanding of how to use the formula in order to substitute.
Why don't we do this, Ms. Pinder?
Yes, sir.
Let me try to get through this.
Yes.
And I will make myself available even if it's out of class time.
Yes, sir.
You can call me and we'll go through those things.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay, because I really don't want to do it at the expense of maybe not covering some of the modules in this.
I do understand. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, but your concern is noted, ma'am. And as I said to you, I don't have a problem with doing it. I will provide you my contact numbers. And and you can easily give me a call, okay?
Roger that.
Okay, Bob.
Rodrika, I just put the files in the chat. I don't know if you guys could download it or not. I took it out of my email. The time value of money sample question and the tables.
Thank you, thank you. I received those.
Yeah, now let me let Rodrigo, those are a lot of questions I picked up off the internet. And I understand your enthusiasm and wanted to cover it. And I will look at the questions with you, having not, because I provided the answers also of those questions. Also, so you could test yourself. But I understand your concern of wanting to be able to work through it. And I ask you to please bear with me. I will make myself available to each and every one of you because there's only about 6 of you. I will have Miguel provide my contact numbers and we could schedule, say, maybe an hour or so on a Saturday. I will make myself available to go through those specific questions, question by question, with the group if we set a time. Is that okay with the group?
Perfect.
Great. Okay, we need to get on to this sector. I gotta cover this sector, the basics of supply and demand. Now we're on to a little economics. Okay, so you see we're switching from finance to economics. As you said earlier, there's a lot of information and a lot of concepts to try. And I just want to make sure I cover all of this, the conceptual part of this, so that when you go back to do your studying, it isn't all unfamiliar with you, okay? Supply and demand is perhaps one of the most fundamental concepts of economics, and it is the backbone of a market economy. Demand refers to how much quantity of a product or service is desired by buyers. The quantity demanded is the amount of a product people are willing to buy at a certain price. The relationship between price and quantity demanded is known as the demand relationship. Supply represents how much the market can offer. I wish they'd put in here how much the market is willing to offer. The quantity supplied refers to the amount of a certain good producers are willing to supply when receiving a certain price. The correlation between price and how much of a good or service is supplied to the market is known as the supply relationship. Price, therefore, is a reflection of supply and demand. The relationship between demand and supply underlie the forces between the allocation of resources. In market economy theories, demand and supply theories will allocate resources in the most efficient way possible. How? Let us take a closer look at the law of demand and supply. Now, the concept behind this, let me stop here. They're making several assumptions here that they aren't quite clear about. Resources can be human as well as material, human labor, land, and whatever the resources are required to produce a product. And they are normally scarce. So what this demand supply is always considering is based upon the scarcity of the resources I have, and some resources are scarcer than others, and it'll be reflected in the price. How do I allocate the resources that I have in a way that is most efficient, that is getting me the most return, And if I'm demanding this, it is getting me the most utility satisfaction. The law of demand states that if all other factors remain equal, the higher the price of a good, the less people will demand that good. In other words, the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. For the most part, there are exceptions. This is saying for the most part. The amount of a good that buyers purchase at a higher price is less because as the price of a good goes up, so does the opportunity cost of buying that good. As a result, people will naturally avoid buying a product that will force them to forego the consumption of something else they value more. The chart below shows that the curve is downward sloping. Couple of questions. Does everybody understand the concept of opportunity cost?
Can you give me another example?
Pardon me?
Can you provide another example?
All right. Here's a very good example. Everybody here lives on a set income, right? Well, I think everybody has a set income. Yes?
Yes, sir.
So with this set income, when you sit down and come up with your budget, you have to decide how you're going to spend this, how you're going to allocate this very, very scarce resource called your salary. All right? So if you take most of your salary and spend it on one product, the opportunity cost associated with that type of strategy is, what did you forego from being able to buy as a result of buying just this one product? In other words, if you only bought bread, your opportunity cost there is you forego the opportunity cost. That means you can't buy butter, eggs, bacon. So it's what you have to give up in order to buy what you want. Does that make sense to people? Come on, guys. If you're not clear, please say it. I don't know if I'm losing you. I don't know if I'm, it's clear to you. Every decision you make had an opportunity cost because it's always that question, what else could I have done with the money I spent?
Yes, sir. Mhm.
Yes,
You got it?
yes, sir.
Okay. Take, for instance, ladies go into a shoe store and they gotta buy, what's a popular shoe, ladies? An expensive shoe.
For our budget, we'll say Clarks.
No, don't say no Clarks. I'm talking about the high end. You know you don't wear no Clarks.
You have Gucci, you have Louis Vuitton, you have Prada, you
Okay.
have
Now take for instance,
Louis
you
Vuittons.
go buy Prada shoes costing you about $600, right? Now, when you sit down later on and say, you know what, I gotta buy me some Clarks and still have enough money and still have had enough money left over to go buy me one dress or something else. Okay? That's the concept. What is the alternative you could have done with the money that you spent on a particular item? Okay? That's opportunity cost. Now, the demand curve, getting back to this graph. As stated, the higher the price, yeah, price 3, price 2, price 1, the higher the price, the less of the quantity demanded. So at price 1, the Prada shoes, only so much is being demanded of that shoe. At price 2, if the price on that were to drop, for some reason, more would be demanded. If the price was to drop further, even more would be demanded. So it's a downward sloping curve. The relationship between price and the quantity demanded is a downward sloping curve. A, B, and C are points on the demand curve. Each point on the curve reflects a direct correlation between quantity demanded and price. So at point A, the quantity demanded would be Q1 and the price would be P1, and so on. The Riemann relationship curve illustrates the negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. I hate that word negative. Let's substitute the inverse relationship. The higher the price of a good, the lower the quantity demanded, and the lower the price, the more of the good that will be demanded. The law of supply. Like the law of demand, the law of supply demonstrates the quantities that will be sold at a certain price. Now, let's look at this 2 ways. On the demand side, we're probably looking at the consumer. Yes? That's the people who go in the store buying the stuff. On the supply side, we are looking at the producer. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense, yes, sir.
Great. Like the law of demand, the law of supply demonstrates the quantities that will be sold at a certain price. But unlike the law of demand, the supply relationship shows an upward sloping curve. This means that the higher the price, the higher the quantity supplied. Producers supply more at a higher price because selling a higher quantity at a higher price increases revenue. That makes sense, right? If the price of a good goes up, producers are going to reallocate their resources to start producing more of that thing that's being demanded, right?
Yep, so they can make more, potentially make more money.
Okay, there you go. A, B, and C are points on the supply curve. Each point on the curve reflects a direct correlation between quantity supplied, Q, and the price, P. At point B, the quantity supplied would be Q2 and the price would be P2, and so on. Time and supply. Unlike the demand relationship, however, the supply relationship is a factor of time. Time is important to supply because suppliers must, but cannot always, react quickly to a change in the demand or price. So it is important to try and determine whether a price change that is caused by demand will be temporary or permanent. Let's say there's a sudden increase in the demand and price for umbrellas in an unexpected rainy season. Suppliers may simply accommodate demand by using their production equipment more intensively. If, however, there is a climate change and the population will need umbrellas year-round, the change in demand and price will be expected to be long-term. Suppliers will have to change their equipment and production facilities in order to meet the long-term levels of demand. Meaning, they may have to go out and buy a whole nother machine. Can anybody give me an example of how that happened in the local economy that you guys may be aware of recently?
Repeat the question, sorry.
Can anybody give me an example that would relate to this or show this when they talk about this time factor that happened right here locally recently that you guys may be aware of?
The purchase of fuel.
A little bit more, keep going.
So there was the opportunity to purchase fuel below market, stockpile it, in hopes of ensuring that the cost to the consumers were stabilized.
Yeah, but that's ongoing. That's ongoing. Yeah, that is a reflection of the price. They don't really reconfigure the gas station. The point I'm trying to make, remember during the pandemic, are you all familiar with the Bacardi plant out there on Meeting Street that made rum?
Yes, and they now make sanitizers.
Bingo! Okay, now that happened when they stopped making rum, they reconfigured their production line to start making sanitizers. Everybody is familiar with that? This is Rodrigo, right?
Yes, sir.
Tell us what happened, Rodrigo.
Well, because of the pandemic and the various lockdowns and restrictions, their ability to sell their main product, which is alcohol, was limited. So they, as you say, they reconfigured their production plant and decided to make a Bahamian made hand sanitizer.
Now,
So
the thing is, I'm sitting down now, so okay, because one of the ingredients in their rum anyway was the alcohol, which is one of the things used in the hand sanitizer, okay? They just reconfigured now and put it in the little spray plastic bottles, so they did it, reconfigured their line to be able to accommodate putting it in the plastic bottles as opposed to the rum bottles. Now I'm sitting down here with my team at the Bacardi rum factory or whatever. I'm saying now, the decision I gotta make, wow, well, when this economy opens back up, do I go back to just doing rum? Or do I need to increase my production plan? Because I believe this hand sanitizing thing is going to be even going on for a little while after this pandemic is gone. People now get in the habit of using sanitizers. So this is a big product. There was a time when the pharmacies during the pandemic ran out of the hand sanitizers. That's what prompted this man to reconfigure this thing to say, hey, you can get this locally. We can make a local hand sanitizer. Now, here's the decision going to be, do I now become a rum and a hand sanitizer distributor? Because he now feels this hand sanitizing stuff. Well, you know, rum can sell as soon as good time. So rum is selling good time and bad time. The only thing that stopped rum from selling is to lock down. You know, that's a stable product. But my decision is, do I go and buy a whole nother assembly plant that just makes these hand sanitizers? Do I think this is a long-term business now? Do I have to increase my plant capacity? Now that we know the laws of supply and demand, let's turn to an example to show how supply and demand affect price. Imagine that a special edition CD of your favorite band is released for $20. Because the record company's previous analysis showed that the consumers will not demand CDs at a price higher than $20, only 10 CDs were released because the opportunity cost is too high for suppliers to produce more at this price point. If, however, the 10 CDs are demanded by 20 people, the price will subsequently rise because according to the demand relationship, as demand increases, so does the price. Consequently, the rise in the price should prompt more CDs to be supplied, as the supply relationship shows that the higher the price, that at the higher price, the higher the quantity supplied. If, however, there are 30 CDs produced and demand is still at 20, the price will not push up because the supply more than accommodates demand. In fact, after 20 consumers have been satisfied with their CD purchases, the price of the leftover CDs may drop as CD producers attempt to sell the remaining 10 CDs. The lower price will then make the CD more available to people who had previously decided that the opportunity cost of buying the CD at 20 was too high. Mr. Pinder, give me an example of this concept here.
KFC selling sauce.
I see another one where they got the McFritter now, where McDonald's producing comforters. No, but the concept I'm after, y'all ever been watching TV, particularly in the US, and you see these automobile companies selling it because they got to supply, they got to move the 2020 inventory they have of cars because they got to get in their 2021 shipments. So they start dropping the price on it to try and move out their inventory of stocked cars, last year's stocked cars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Equilibrium. When supply and demand are equal, that is when the supply function and the demand function intersect, the economy is said to be at equilibrium. At this point, allocation of goods is at the most efficient because the amount of goods being supplied is exactly the same as the amount of goods being demanded. Thus, everyone, individual firms or countries, is satisfied with the current economic condition. At the given price, suppliers are selling all the goods that they have produced, and consumers are getting all the goods that they are demanding. Okay? That is called equilibrium, market equilibrium. This is called the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. At this price, where these two curves that they call intersect, that where they intersect there, that is what is called market equilibrium. As you can see on the chart, equilibrium occurs at the intersection of the demand and supply curve, which indicates no allocative inefficiency. At this point, the price of the goods will be P star or asterisk, and the quantity will be Q star or asterisk. These figures are referred to as equilibrium price and quantity. Anywhere else along this quadrant will not be the most efficient price, because if the price went up to here, it will not be, the intersecting or market equilibrium will then be at this quantity out here. But in this example, for this plotting, this is the equilibrium. In the real marketplace, equilibrium can only ever be reached in theory, never really in practice. So the prices of goods and services are constantly changing in relation to fluctuations in demand and supply. This equilibrium occurs whenever the price or quantity is not equal to P star or Q star. Excess supply. If the price is set too high, excess supply will be created within the economy and there will be allocated inefficiency. Suppose the price was here, right? The price, the demand and supply curve does not intersect here. That means it's not at its efficient frontier. If you go all the way across, you'll see it never intersects with demand and supply. The price and the quantity never, it's only at this point that they intersect. At price P1, the quantity of goods that the producers wish to supply is indicated by Q2. At P1, however, the quantity that the consumers want to purchase is at Q1, a quantity much less than, I'm not going to go through it. That's the quantity. It is out of equilibrium. You can see by the picture, it is out of equilibrium. This is the only equilibrium point. Okay, so you could have excess supply, and excess supply and or excess demand happens when this is not being met. Shifts versus movements. For economics, the movements and shifts in relation to the supply and demand curve represent very different market phenomena. Movement. A movement refers to change along a curve. On the demand curve, a movement denotes a change in both price and the quantity demanded from one point to another on the same curve. Okay. Why I'm saying that, here's your demand curve, right? A movement is if anything happens along this curve. If you move this point from point here to point B, it's a movement along the curve. All right, the price now is at this point and the quantity demanded is at this point, but it's along this same plotted curve. That's movement. Therefore, a movement along the demand curve will occur when the price of the good changes and the quantity demanded changes in accordance to the original demand relationship. In other words, a movement occurs when a change in the quantity demanded is caused only by a change in the price and vice versa, when it is only caused by a change in the price. Here, they show you the movement along the demand curve. All of those are price movements along the same demand curve. In other words, this relationship that helped plotted this curve is still intact. That means if your price goes up $1, the quantity demanded is going to drop a certain amount. It's predictable. Like a movement along the demand curve, a movement along the supply curve means that the supply relationship remains consistent. Therefore, a movement along the supply curve will occur when the price of the good changes and the quantity supplied changes in accordance to original supply relationship. In other words, a movement occurs when a quantity